Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick break to shout out our sponsor, ASI Racewear. ASI Racewear has been serving racers with custom designed fire suits, team uniforms, and racing apparel throughout the Northeast and East Coast for 40 years. They are, if you're a racer, if you're a race team, whatever you are, if you're starting your own team, they are the apparel and embroidery process that you want to go through. They've got a world-class art department. They've got world-class manufacturing processes that make them efficient with a quick turnaround and delivery. ASI Racewear is your best source of racing wear, period. Period. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Again, you've got to check them out, asiracewear.com. You could also contact Al Heisley at gmail.com. We'll put the email up there. He will help you out to get that custom racing apparel that you so deserve. They're world class. They're easy to work with. They'll communicate. They'll work around your schedule, whatever it is. And they've got quality products. So make sure you check out ASI Racewear all over the Northeast and the East Coast. Check them out. Let's get back to the show. All right, we are back with another episode of Johnny on the Track. And tonight we have a very special guest. You probably know him on Twitter as the deliverer, the messenger of all news NASCAR related. But he is the NASCAR reporter for Fox Sports. He is Bob Pockrass. Bob, thank you so much for coming on.
Glad to be on, Johnny at the track.
Yes, exactly. Johnny on the track. It's a little tongue twister there. But so let's get right into it. So obviously where you are now, reporting, tweeting every day for Fox Sports and NASCAR. But let's take it back. Let's go all the way back. To me, you don't really strike me as a guy that I don't know, that looks like a NASCAR guy. And I feel like I get that a lot too. We don't really look like NASCAR guys. So was NASCAR growing up for you something you loved? Was racing a big influence in your household? So take me through that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how a NASCAR person is supposed to look, but I moved to Indianapolis when I was 10, and so my first Indy 500 was in 1980. I started, when I was a student at Indiana University. I'd help out as a quote runner for UPI at the Indy 500 during the summers in the late 80s, early 90s. And then my first job out of college was covering mostly high school and college sports for the Daytona Beach News Journal. I started there in 91. So my first Daytona 500, I helped out with all the racing coverage when I could, was in 1992. And that was pretty much my introduction to NASCAR, the short tracks in Florida, and then the races in Daytona. So that's kind of where I got, started following NASCAR, is probably 1992.
Okay.
And then I spent about 12 years at the newspaper. And then 2003, I went to NASCAR Scene, and that's pretty much when I was kind of full-time focused on NASCAR.
So growing up then in your area, it was a thing. It was big.
It's definitely IndyCar, in Indianapolis in the 1980s. Not a whole lot of NASCAR. I would say my first real introduction to NASCAR is probably Days of Thunder.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
Probably. And I didn't really know what to believe, and I didn't really think that all the crews would be congratulating a guy who had wrecked somebody a year or two earlier like that. But, that was probably my real introduction to stock cars. I was more familiar with Indy cars until 1991.
Well, that's interesting because I kind of you say Days of Thunder got you kind of introduced to it. Honestly, for me, it was like video games got me introduced to it. Just like playing normal racing games, whether it be like Crash Bandicoot or NASCAR Thunder 2003. That's kind of what geared me into it. So I kind of see where you're coming from there, but that's interesting. So let's now go to college. You said Indiana University of Bloomington, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So, what do you think? So, I went to Emerson College and I did sports communication. So, I'm sure sort of a similar path. What do you think, kind of prepared you in college to, to learn what you know now and all of that?
Well, I like to joke that I have my own version of the Indiana double,
Okay.
and
All right.
it's that my right butt cheek has been chewed out by Bob Knight, and my left butt cheek has been chewed out by Tony Stewart. So I would say that, I mean, when you are in the middle of media press conferences with Bob Knight, that's going to prepare you for pretty much anything that you're going to see going forward as far as being in press conferences. Now, there's nothing that could prepare you for social media
Hmm.
and and internet and all that, because that wasn't around. That there's no. But what the preparation was being able. When I was a student at Indiana University, the school paper was the only paper in Bloomington, Indiana that was a morning paper.
Okay.
The local city paper was the afternoon paper, so we were the morning paper for a lot of people. It was actually printed at the facility of the local city paper in Bloomington. But so that's how far back that goes. So we really learned about deadlines and being able uh, to work under having to get that paper out in the morning because people depended on it. And so I think that's where the best preparation went. We got paid, $4, $5, $6 a story to write for the school paper.
Oh man.
But the way it worked is that there was a big pot for bonus money at the end of the year for editors to give to reporters. And the way it worked was every 15, we were supposed to be, the paper was supposed to be done by midnight. And every 15 minutes it was late would be money would come out of the pot for bonuses to pay the fine, to
Oh
pay.
no.
So either to pay for people who were waiting to do the printing and all that, or just as an incentive for us to get it done. So it was a great way to learn that you had to meet deadlines or else you're going to get money out of your pocket. But it's also a way to say, hey, if this story is big enough, if this basketball game is going to run till 12:30, we're willing to give up a little bit of our bonus money to make sure that it gets in the paper. So we learned a lot about how to kind of manage newspaper and deadlines, and that helped a lot early in my career. It wouldn't help now when most newspapers go to press in the early evening and just rely on the internet for the late scores and the late stories.
Well, that's interesting because, like obviously you're so, well, what I would think, but usually you're the first one to report something. So I assume you're quick with your stuff, like quick on the turnaround and all that. So let's like go a little bit deeper into that. So obviously, like I said early introducing you, you kind of are like the messenger, the deliverer of all news NASCAR related. Like people wait for a Bob Pockrass tweet. They really do. And like right now, I'm sure people are waiting every day for you to announce something about Kurt Busch. I mean, that's just what it is. So, with all that being said, what like how does that make you feel? Like, do you feel like that's extra added
There's a lot of
pressure?
pressure.
Okay, yeah. So
It's
talk to me
pressure
about
from, I
that.
mean, you hear it from people in the garage too. Hey, I mean, look, there certainly is pressure, but I think the thing is, I guess I'm a very conscientious person. People would probably use the word anal. Can we use that
Yes, we can use
on
it.
this
We can use
podcast?
it.
And that those attributes of being able to continue to try to flush out the news is something that that I guess I'm good at. The thing is that you know there is pressure, but I mean you got to be right, and so you've got to have and everybody kind of has different. Every news outlet has different standards for reporting when it comes to sources and everything. So
Mhm.
sometimes you you sometimes you just get beat because there's competition and you can't be first everything. Sometimes it comes down to whether somebody's reporting standards are maybe a little bit different than yours.
Yeah, right.
But that's, there's pressure, but again, you want to be right, and that's and that's to me, that's the biggest pressure of it all, is that you don't want to um you, you can't go out on a limb just to try to be first, because at some point that limb will break.
And that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And you mentioned something earlier that I thought was interesting. You mentioned talking to Bob Knight, talking to Tony Stewart, was kind of like that gave you experience. So I talked to Mike Massaro, who I had on, I don't know, a couple months ago, and he kind of said similar things. He's like, an interview with Tony Stewart teaches you a lot. An interview with an upset Kyle Busch teaches you a lot. And then I was listening to Marty Smith, who was talking about an interaction he had with Dale Jr., where basically Dale said straight up to him, like, hey, man, you got to start listening. Like, you got to start listening to what the guest says. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, where can you kind of go through an experience where maybe you learned from somebody you were interviewing? Maybe it was an interview that went terrible and you learned from you kind of learn like how to approach the next one that might have a similar direction to it.
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't. I and I remember Mike was saying that. I want to say that he said on your podcast that you kind of just you go through those situations and they could be a little bit awkward, right? Or he
Right,
said,
right.
but you gotta get done. People expect you to ask the questions. I think I would say that uh, the biggest difference now is that everything is on social media, and there's immediate social media reaction, and a press conference is designed for us to gather information, and yet now every single way that we ask a question, and maybe if we ask the question a third different way, maybe because we're trying to nail something down as far as some facts, or
Right.
maybe we think he didn't really answer the question, can I ask it a different way? So I can't say that a certain interview taught me anything, but I will say that now that people watch, like I think you're a little bit more cognizant of how you ask things and maybe how you approach things, just because that that people are watching, and you want to make sure that if you ask something, you may have to explain why you asked it that way on social media. I wouldn't say that social media really determines how you ask it, but certainly that there might be a reaction to it. So I'm just kind of going through. Again, I don't. I think every time you're criticized on something, you take it's important to say, not just dismiss the criticism, but go back and take a look and say, hey, could I have done something differently, or could I, and a lot of times the answer is probably no, or should I know? But there are times where you're like, hey, I probably should have started asking a certain question, or maybe start with a different line of questioning, and kind of waited to maybe ask the question that I did. That's probably kind of maybe the biggest thing you learn.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, sometimes you've seen, right, like a reporter will ask, like I said, maybe like a disgruntled Kyle Busch, like they'll start with something that'll, get them right off, get them upset right at the beginning, where maybe you go back and you say, well, maybe I could maybe I could have started with something a little less.
And sometimes it'll be like you try to start with a little less, and then all of a sudden the interview, like something happens and it gets cut short, and you never asked what you wanted to ask. So I think it's all about managing situations. And I think I mean, you're asking you're asking questions because you know that the readers the viewers are the listeners are interested, right? And
Right.
so it's that you've been given that credential to do that job, and it's not always going to be it's not always going to be uh, it's not always going to be friendly. There is a natural adversarial um, times, and you've got to be able to handle that, and got to be and just expect it, and you've got to expect that you're going to end up as a viral video at some point. I mean, I think
You're
that's
right.
a
Yeah.
lot of people ask for advice, and I say don't be afraid to end up on some website saying, like, oh, listen to how this driver hated this person's question. If you ask enough questions in your lifetime, that's going to happen. I mean, it's just you can't be afraid of that, or else you'll never ask the questions that need to be answered.
That's great advice. I mean, that's really good advice. And I think like that could translate, everywhere, right? Like I've done a lot of these podcasts. Who knows how many at this point, but there's some that, haven't gone how I wanted to, right? Like you ask a question, you think you'll get this response and you get a totally different one, or you think you're going down the right path with the guests and then kind of it sidetracks, right? And you're kind of like, dang, I wish, I could have asked this, or I wish we could have, been on the same wavelength a little bit more. But I think that just comes with, like you said, like I'm going to do a lot of these, right? I'm going to do a lot of these,
Yeah.
and some are going to
And
be
you'll
great, some are going to be not good, and that's what it is.
if you're doing them 30 years from now, you'll still be like, oh man, I should have asked this at this point, or should have done this. That happens, just like a football coach, right? Like, I should have run to the left instead of the right. It's part of you're never going to be perfect all the time, and we're doing this at what somewhat in the evening, right?
Yeah,
You've been
yeah.
up all day, and are we at our best? Maybe not, right? And it's I always find it fun that we often, when we're asking questions to drivers after a race, most of us have been there, us and the drivers probably been there for 10 to 12 hours.
Oh my gosh.
So look, that's our job.
Right.
We're asking, we're supposed to be able to do that, but it's still, there are days where you're like, man, wasn't at my best today. It happens.
Yeah, and again, it's great advice, and I'm glad you shared that on the podcast. So let's talk a little bit. We just talked about social media and all that. So how do you think? Obviously, like I said, you are a big name on social media, and I'm sure when you started your career, there was no social media. Like you said, you were writing for the newspaper. How much has it really changed the way that you do your job?
Oh, well, it changes everything, because when you worked for a newspaper, you had a deadline at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or 8, and so you could wait and be, say, hey, call somebody, hey, do you have, I'm writing this, it's going to press tonight. You have until 6 o'clock if you want to comment. And now it's call and you say, hey, I'm going to post this on Twitter in 10 to 15 seconds. Do you want to say
Oh
anything
my
about
God.
it? Right.
Yeah.
And there might be times, there might be some topics where you try to give somebody a little bit of time, depending
Mhm.
on, but there's not enough. Every story is an evolving story now, right? The little bits and pieces come out as the stories develop. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of time where you can give somebody a little bit of extra time to kind of gather their thoughts and be prepared. Now, again, there are certain things where you would you would try very hard to do that, but there are also times where things get posted. So it's a 24-second news cycle instead of a 24-hour news cycle, right now. And so that and so that really that changes the job. There's with phones and people able to post video, though, there's a lot of times where you get a lot more accurate information or more photos and video to be able to tell stories than you would in the past, right? If something if when parts and pieces of cars have unfortunately gone into the grandstands, people are tweeting, saying, they're showing it to us, right? They're telling us, I don't need to go and try to find somebody. I mean, it's easy for me to find somebody who was near and who saw it happen, because unless they've, certainly people can doctor photos and stuff, but typically in real time, you are able to, it's much easier to be able to verify that somebody is where they say they are, right?
And I think
So I
that's
think
a
that
great
really
point.
helps.
No, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great point. And think about like you can look just this week with like the curb, like now in social media, like if you're not watching the race and then you just check Twitter for a sec, you hear about the curb, you can go like tweet the curb and you'll find a picture of it. But back then, like if you were trying to explain that to somebody, like, oh, you missed a race, like a curb, like the curb got like enlarged from the whole track, and you try to be like what do you mean, and you would have to wait, you could either see it on TV when you get the chance, or you'd have to see it in a newspaper. And I think that's like a perfect example of what you're saying. It's like right here on this thing, if you can, there it is, the phone, right as it's going, you look up the curve, it's going to be right there for you. And I'm like, that's such an interesting point. What did you say? You said 24. It used to be a 24-second deadline now, or 24-hour deadline.
Well, it used to be in 24-hour news cycle, right? Now it's 24 seconds.
That should be on like a t-shirt. I mean, that really should. I
But
mean, that's just crazy.
And it's more than social media. Remember when Dale Jr. won? I want to say he won Michigan. He hadn't won in a while. And his girlfriend Amy, now his wife, gave him a big hug in Victory Lane. Well, about 20 or 30 minutes after that race, I got a call from somebody. I was working at the Sporting News, and they said Google searches have spiked for Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s girlfriend. We're seeing a lot of people searching for that and trying to come to our site. Can we get a quote from her? Can we because people are searching for it. It'd be great if we could do that. And so I text Junior's people. We get a quote from Dale Jr.'s girlfriend. I think I just sent it to somebody at the desk, and they typed it up and posted it. Now, you would never have that, right? Like, I mean, there's no training for that. There's right. Back in the late 80s or early 90s, but now, websites know what people are searching for to generate traffic. And,
right.
And obviously people are paying ads on stories. And so, so that was a way that's how things have changed, is that we know who is searching when they're coming to our website. We know if they're putting in the website name and coming, or whether they're coming from a Google search, so it's and that helps determine how things are done, right? Ricky Stenhouse Jr. used to always get upset when the headline would say Danica Patrick's boyfriend, right? But more people would read the story and come to read about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. if that was in the headline, and if that was in the URL, because people would search it, would come to it via search. Yeah. And it was nothing against Ricky Stenhouse, right? You'd have to explain that to him. Like, it's not a sign of disrespect to you, but it is a way for us to get people to read about you. And that's, obviously a huge change over the last 5 to 10 years, as we really start, as people's whole jobs are analyzing data and trying to figure out what keywords and what key topics people want to read about.
I find it so interesting too, the different ways that people have been able to just market themselves in general. Like I'm doing this small podcast, but you look at all the different on NASCAR Twitter, just all the people that are able to share whatever they do. There's a guy that does like these minute TikToks, right? And he'll like put the number of the driver up, and he'll do like a race recap all from like TikTok with a minute. I mean, it's just insane what people are able to do and share. And so that brings me to another question. We talked earlier about, that you got to ask the tough questions, and it's hard. And, sometimes it doesn't go the way you want it. You, to me, and I don't know if you've ever got this, but you have a very calm demeanor about yourself, kind of soft-spoken guy. Do you think that kind of helps you ask these difficult questions?
Maybe, I mean, first off, I mean, I'm not running into burning buildings. I'm not a fireman. I'm not, if you want to talk about difficult situations, you can talk to my, one of my relatives who did 2 to 3 tours in Afghanistan, right? Like, I mean, there's, I mean, certainly we are put in awkward positions and
Hmm.
uncomfortable positions,
Right.
but when it comes right down to it, it's not scary, for the most part. It's now you can impact people's lives from what you write and from how they react, to your question, and people see, sponsors see that, and teams see that, so that you can have an impact on the subjects that you're covering. But it's not, there certainly are people who have it a lot scarier and a lot more difficult than I do. And I think that knowing that is the first thing. And the other thing is that if you just know that it's business, it's not personal. I don't,
Right. Right.
I just,
Right.
you never really take anything personally that, if drivers yell at you or whatever. I mean, yeah, you don't want drivers to be upset,
Hmm.
because your job is to get information out of them. And if they're upset with you, that probably makes it more difficult. But at the end of the day, you work for the fans, and you work for the readers, and you work for the listeners, and you work for the viewers. And if you put yourself in their position of, man, what do they want to know? And sometimes, you can have a way of asking a question that might elicit maybe a more emotional response,
Right.
right? Because you're um, really trying to get to the emotion of it, and the whys, and the story behind the story. And so I don't, it's it I guess it's, look, I care about what I do. I don't want to, and I want to be fair, but
Hmm.
I usually sleep okay, except when you know that you have a story that's controversial and could impact someone, but know that it's important to get out there, and then you don't sleep at all. But most of the time, you it's just, I think if you build a reputation of treating people fair, and which I think I have, then I'm gonna say it's easy. But look, it's what you do. I guess I don't know any other way to to put it. I mean, it's just the nature of the job is there's going to be times where you're going to be at odds, or adversarial, as I've said. And you just, if that gets you worked up and gets you, you know um thinking that you're going to get in a shouting match with people a bunch of times, then maybe it's not really the best
Not
best
built.
place
You're
for
not
you.
built for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great advice. And I hope, for me at least, right. Still trying to, who knows if I'll try to pursue something in media and NASCAR. Like I said, that's what I went to school for. And I appreciate all those words you said, because it's good advice for people who want to do this, who want to get in media. And so I guess with that, I'll ask you, what if you could give one small kind of piece of advice, if you could tie all that in to one quick, I don't know, 15-20 second kind of spiel, what would you say?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions, and ask, if as long as you feel like that it's an appropriate question to ask. Don't be afraid to ask it. I mean, it's our job to ask questions. Sometimes you get the answers you want, or not. I wouldn't say get the answers you want. Sometimes you get an answer that you like. The other thing I would say is, don't expect a certain answer. If the best questions are ones that where you don't really know the answer.
Yeah, and again, that's great advice, and I hope, I know there are people, young people, college students studying this stuff and want to get into NASCAR that watch this show, and I know they're gonna listen to that and take all that in, and continue to learn, and that's what I'm trying to do. Every person that comes on this show, I want to learn from them, learn from what they've done in their career, how they've done it, and just take all this, take advice, and use it for whatever. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not in sports one day, but maybe I'm doing business. And like you said, don't be afraid to ask questions. And you can plan for a lot of responses. Like I said earlier, sometimes I want the conversation to go one way, it goes a little different, right? But it's about rolling with the punches. So with that, we got to roll with some punches. We've got a game. We always play a game at the end of Johnny on the Track, and I told you a little bit about it before we started when we were off the air. So this one's called Quick Pits.
Okay.
Like in a NASCAR race, you got to be quick. The pit crew's got to be on. So what I'm going to do, I got 5 questions for you. You got to give me quick 15, 20-second responses. All right.
All right. Okay.
All right. Let's do it, Bob. All right. All right. So the first question, I asked this on a Twitter poll this morning. It got about like 60 votes already. So the first question, whose career would be impacted the most with a first career Cup Series win? Bubba Wallace, Matt DiBenedetto, Daniel Suarez, or Ryan Preece?
It'd be Bubba Wallace. There's just so many people outside of NASCAR who are watching Bubba Wallace and seeing what he does, and if he wins, it brings a little bit more. I mean, the knock on Bubba Wallace is that he hasn't won, and if he wins, then people can't use that against him when they say that he doesn't deserve his ride.
So I'll give you a little update. So Bubba's in second. Matt DiBenedetto actually has a commanding lead. For me, I'll go over quick who I think. I think it's Ryan Preece of that bunch. I personally think he's the most talented of those 4. And I think if he shows he's won in Wheel and Tour, he's won in the Truck Series now, he's won in the Xfinity Series. If he shows that he can win in Cup, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for Ryan Preece. But that's a little hometown bias, Bob, a little New England bias we got. All right. Question number 2. So what track do you want to see on the schedule in 2022 that is not currently on it now?
I want to see Rockingham on it.
All right.
They can be on it 2022, but I loved Rockingham, the way the drivers would slide off of turn 4 out of control. That still is one of my favorite tracks, and I don't know that it can be brought back for 2022, but if I had a wish list, I'd find a way to make it happen.
I love that. And that, honestly, that's what a lot of people will say, is that they want Rockingham back. I'm a little different. I would like to see Gateway back for the Cup cars. I think Gateway is an interesting track. I think it always provides when it was. Is it on the? I forget if it's on the Truck Series this year, but every time it was on the Truck Series
there on Friday.
So there we go. So they always give a good show, the trucks. I would like to see that kind of translate to the Cups. So all right, we got number 3 here. Here we go. So who? And again, this might be one that you don't want to answer, but who is your favorite current driver to interact with?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
I know.
Well, I would say right now it's probably Denny Hamlin, because he's so spicy on Twitter, right?
He is.
And but I don't know that that'll be true in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks when the playoffs start, and he might have to be a little bit more
lock it in a little bit
conservative. But for some reason, Denny Hamlin's been fun most recently to interact with, especially since he's become an owner. I think he's really try to find a voice. So I just say that we're just his responses have been just so much more in depth than what they used to be.
Denny Hamlin's become a meme machine. He really has, and he's done a good job at it. I followed Denny for a while, and I think a lot of people would say like this year Denny's gotten great on Twitter. And I think, like you said, a lot of it has to do with he's got to continue to build 2311. He's got to build that brand. So, being the personality that he is on Twitter goes a long way. All right. So we got question 4 here. What do you have? Maybe you don't, but do you have an embarrassing tweet story you could share quick? Maybe a tweet gone wrong. Maybe, I don't know.
Man, I don't.
You're perfect, Bob. You don't have one.
No, I'm not perfect. They're. I mean, there's just so many tweets. There's actually just a lot of tweets where it's. Well, here was one. Who was it? Did I was I writing about? Did I tweet about priests? I tweet about somebody doing really well and then they had an issue. I think it was. Oh man, I can't remember who it was, but recently I tweeted about somebody doing really well, and then like 2 laps later they had an issue. Might have been Priest.
Oh no, I hope it wasn't I'm gonna go back and try to find that, Bob, because if it's Priest, I'll be a little upset. But oh my God,
No,
if I could
maybe it was Christopher Bell.
possible, maybe when he was leading and then Larson, he got into Larson, maybe that could be it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, hey, if I told you the amount of times where I'm like, Priest is looking great, and then and then right spun out or something, it's countless times, and usually you probably won't interact back with it, but usually I'll have to, if someone says, yeah, look at that, Priest is doing great or something like that, I'll usually have to go back at the person and share my love with my favorite driver. All right, we got one more for you. Who is your 2021 champion?
I'm gonna go with Larson right now.
Okay. All right.
A few weeks before playoffs, that's who I go with. I mean, could Truex do it? You always think that Truex, having won Phoenix and Martinsville earlier in the year, he potentially could pull it off, but I don't know that he gets to the Final Four. If Truex gets to the Final Four, he's going to be tough to beat at Phoenix, but I think it'll be Larson.
I like the pick. I think it's probably the evidence wise the best pick. I've stood by the fact all through the year that I think Kurt Busch is going to win the championship. Early on in the year, he tweeted a video that looked like he was teasing retirement, comes out, has a great season, gets an awesome win in Atlanta. And I don't know, it fueled early on from me just thinking this is going to be his swan song. This is going to be his last year. That has totally gone out the window because teams are calling him left and right. But that's who I think it's going to be. And Chevy's been fast. I like a Chevy winning if it's not Kurt Busch. I think probably Larson's the way to go. But your Fox there has can this the best season ever, and I think finish Kurt Busch winning it all would definitely spice that up, right? Best season ever. So, all right. So there it was. Quick picks with Bob Pockrass. Bob, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope to stay in touch in the future.
All right, thanks, Johnny.